All right, let's get right into this explainer. We're looking at exactly how the Department of Defense is completely overhauling its arsenal for the future. We are diving straight into the DoD's Fiscal Year 2025 report on force structure changes. And honestly, whether you're a defense hardware nerd or just a taxpayer wondering where billions of your dollars are going, the shifts outlined here are nothing short of historical. We are talking about a massive, fundamental reshaping of the American military. So why the sudden rush to retire over 500 aircraft and ships in just one single year? Well, it all comes down to a really tough balancing act. The DoD is basically caught between a rock and a hard place. They have to maintain this massive, aging fleet of legacy systems, but they also have an urgent need to fund future high-tech capabilities to counter near-peer adversaries. To fix that math, they are making the painful call to retire 503 assets in a single fiscal year. And here's the payoff. Slashing those legacy systems represents a staggering $3.3 billion decrease in estimated operational costs for 2025 alone. That is a massive chunk of capital being aggressively ripped from past technologies and redirected straight into the future force.
To see how this all shakes out, we'll quickly run through the overall modernization trade-off, then hit the changes coming to the Army, the Navy and Marine Corps, the Air Force, and finally wrap up with the hidden costs of just trying to hold on to the past.
All right, part one, the modernization trade-off.
You know, the DoD doesn't just see this as hauling old gear to the scrapyard. They actually frame this whole thing as a performance improvement framework. Basically, it's strategic divestment. They are purposefully axing legacy equipment or even entire programs so they can free up the cash for purchases that actually support the military's future-facing priorities.
Now, to really get this, we have to talk about expected service life, or ESL. Because the big controversy and, honestly, the biggest cost savings don't usually come from retiring gear that's literally falling apart at the seams. The real friction happens when the military proposes pulling the plug on assets way before their planned lifespan is actually up.
Looking at the 484 total aircraft getting retired, you can see right away that the Air Force is taking the absolute brunt of this. They're dumping 251 airframes. But make no mistake, every single branch is feeling the squeeze here, from the Navy down to Special Operations Command.
Which brings us to part two, Army intelligence and helicopters.
Down on the ground, the Army is taking a very direct out with the old, in with the new approach. They're actually retiring 17 of their legacy turboprop intelligence planes way ahead of their ESL. Why? Because slower prop planes just aren't going to cut it against advanced adversaries anymore. They desperately need faster, jet-powered alternatives, like the new Hades system, to handle deep sensing missions in multi-domain operations.
It's the exact same story with their helicopters. The Army is aggressively ditching 66 older UH-60L Blackhawks, but they aren't actually losing that airlift capability. This divestment lines up perfectly with them bringing in the shiny new, modernized UH-60M and digitized V models. So it's a pretty clean recapitulation effort.
Let's head out to sea for part three, Navy ships and aircraft. The Navy is looking to decommission 19 ships in total, which banks them nearly $225 million. But here's the catch. While 9 of those ships are legitimately at the end of their lifespan, 10 of them are being retired early. For example, they're cutting 5 TEPF-class ships simply because they've gotten way too expensive to sustain, and honestly, they just don't offer much use in a high-end maritime fight anymore. And this is where we see a really fascinating tug-of-war with congressional oversight. The Navy is neutrally resubmitting requests to retire 4 specific ships, including 2 littoral combat ships, the Jackson and Montgomery, which, by the way, are only about a decade old. Congress flat-out denied their early retirement last year, but the Navy needs the funds, so they are trying again. On the aviation side for the Navy and Marines, the math is crystal clear. As classic jets like the AVAB Harriers and FA-18 Hornets max out their airframe limits, every single dollar saved from retiring them goes straight into buying advanced F-35B and F-35C fighters. It's a total generational leap.
All right, moving on to part four, overhauling the Air Force.
Like we saw earlier, the Air Force is undergoing the most dramatic teardown of all. Slashing 251 aircraft in a single year is a massive structural shift, but it nets them a jaw-dropping $2.58 billion in cost avoidance for 2025 alone. So what exactly is getting the axe to save all that money? Well, it's platforms you probably know and love. We're talking 56 A-10 Warthogs and 65 F-15C and D models. The Air Force is basically arguing that these iconic older planes just cannot survive in a modern, high-tech threat environment anymore. They have to right-size the current inventory so they can funnel that cash into the highly classified NGAD program, the next-generation air dominance family of systems.
And honestly, this shows just how ruthless they have to be to make the budget work. I mean, they are cutting 32 advanced F-22 training jets early just to fund NGAD. And classic bombers like the B-1 and B-2, they're stepping aside to clear the financial runway for the brand new B-21 Raider. It is literally all about freeing up resources to maximize the procurement of newer, more survivable tech.
Finally, Part 5, the cost of holding on.
So, you might be wondering, why can't we just keep it all? Well, the answer comes down to something called the buyback cost. When Congress or policymakers want to save an aging asset from the chopping block, they have to eat this massive, hidden financial penalty to keep it on life support. You aren't just paying for gas, you're paying for unbudgeted massive engine overhauls or trying to source spare parts that literally do not exist anymore.
To put that burden into perspective, if you want to squeeze just 2 more years out of a maxed-out EC-130H, it costs $14 million per plane just for the maintenance waivers. Or take the USS Germantown. Keeping a ship that's operating way past its 35-year lifespan running actively clogs up our private repair yards. That takes vital resources away from newer, more lethal platforms. Holding on to the past literally drags down the readiness of the future force.
Which leaves us with a pretty heavy question. As our adversaries rapidly modernize their own militaries, is this painful sacrifice, trading the sheer mass of the familiar arsenal we have today, really the only path to keeping our competitive edge for tomorrow? It is a multi-billion-dollar gamble, and honestly, the fallout of this trade-off is going to shape our global military posture for decades to come.